The Haunted Doll Annabelle. The old Victorian house on the edge of town had always been shrouded in mystery. Its peeling paint, creaky floors, and overgrown garden whispered secrets of a bygone era. Few dared to venture near, and those who did never stayed long. It was said that the house was cursed, that the spirits of its former inhabitants lingered, trapped by their own unfinished business. Among the rumors and ghost stories, one name was always mentioned with a shiver: Annabelle. Sarah and Mark Thompson, a young couple fresh from the city, were oblivious to these tales. They were enamored by the house's charm and the incredible deal they had secured. With plans to restore it to its former glory, they moved in with high hopes and bright dreams. Sarah, an artist, saw potential in every cracked wall and dusty corner. Mark, a history buff, was fascinated by the house's rich past. On their second day, while exploring the attic, they found Annabelle. The doll was nestled in a dusty wooden box, wrapped in a faded, moth-eaten cloth. She was a porcelain doll, about 2 feet tall, with a cracked face that only added to her eerie beauty. Her glassy blue eyes seemed to follow them as they moved around the attic. "This must be at least 100 years old," Mark said, examining the doll.
"She's beautiful,"
Sarah murmured, though she felt a chill run down her spine as she touched Annabelle's delicate lace dress.
"We should keep her. She'll be perfect in my studio."
From that moment, strange things began to happen. At first, they were small, easily dismissible incidents. Doors left open, lights flickering, objects not where they had been left. Sarah laughed it off, blaming the house's age. Mark wasn't so sure, but he kept his doubts to himself. One night, Sarah was working late in her studio. She was lost in her painting, the only sound the soft scratching of her brush on canvas. Suddenly, she heard a soft giggle. She froze, listening intently. It came again, a child's giggle, coming from behind her. She turned slowly and saw Annabelle sitting on a shelf, her head slightly tilted, eyes fixed on Sarah. The giggle stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Sarah's heart pounded as she stared at the doll, but she shook her head, convincing herself it was just her imagination. The incidents escalated. Sarah would find Annabelle in different rooms, though she was certain she hadn't moved her. Mark's dreams were haunted by the doll, her glassy eyes watching him as he slept. The air grew heavy with an oppressive presence, and a sense of dread filled the house. One evening, Mark came home to find Sarah in a frenzy. She was frantically packing a suitcase, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "We need to leave," she whispered. "Something is wrong with this house, with Annabelle." Mark tried to calm her, but she was insistent. "She's alive, Mark. I've seen her move. I've heard her speak. We need to get out." Reluctantly, Mark agreed. They packed their essentials and decided to spend the night at a nearby hotel. As they were leaving, Sarah took one last look at the house and saw Annabelle standing in the window, watching them leave. They drove in silence, the weight of their decision pressing down on them. At the hotel, Sarah finally seemed to relax, but that night, as they lay in bed, the air grew cold. Mark woke to the sound of scratching at the door. He turned on the light and saw, to his horror, Whitaker advised. It's the only way to free her spirit. With heavy hearts, they returned to the house. The atmosphere was thick with tension as they placed Annabelle back in the attic. Sarah, with tears streaming down her face, whispered, "We're sorry, Annabelle. Please forgive us." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a cold wind swept through the attic, and they heard a faint, sorrowful whisper, "Thank you." The oppressive feeling lifted, and the house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Sarah and Mark left the attic, closing the door behind them. As they stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting the house in a warm, golden light. They never spoke of Annabelle again. The house remained peaceful, and they continued their restoration work. But sometimes, late at night, Sarah